Hello and welcome to Based. We'll be talking about COVID-19 and what we want to do in response to the pandemic that's going on, the economic and social effects of it. So I'm Nathan.
I'm Ben.
I'm Hayden.
And I'm Nico.
Welcome back, guys. This is our third episode of the podcast, so hopefully you're enjoying it. Please leave a like down below, subscribe, and comment your feedback. We would love to hear back from you. And yeah, we'll hop right into it.
Okay, so I think I'll start us off since I started I chose this topic. So I think the first thing to go over is the responses immediately, because we look at, I think today America hit 100,000 people death toll. So how poorly did America handle it, or should we have done something differently, and how do we compare it to European responses and Asian responses? So, for example, in South Korea's probably handled this the best. You can say China did a good job, but no one knows China. Their numbers are kind of sketchy. They might be lying. But in South Korea, they did a lot of testing, and they managed it pretty effectively. And America tried to do that. And one thing, as a somewhat libertarian myself, the CDC had to use their federally made tests, and this meant that we couldn't use foreign-made tests or private tests. So this slowed us down from getting other tests from private manufacturers, so we didn't have tests immediately. And we did this so we'd have effective tests that we knew worked. But then the CDC-made tests did not work anyways. So we literally got the worst of both worlds, and that was a big problem of why we couldn't follow, I suppose, the South Korean plan. I mean, I don't think that's super. The only thing you can really debate there, I could see some of you debating, is some people say that there's fault with our healthcare system. It wasn't able to mobilize and get protective equipments, ventilators, and what have you, because we're very decentralized and very privatized. I don't necessarily agree with this. I mean, you can look, because we have the highest death rate, but the deaths per 100,000, Belgium is the highest at 16%. The US is down at around 6%. And you have France, UK way higher. So I don't think that's a very fair assumption to make. But if one of you disagrees with that or thinks that centralized healthcare would work better, feel free to talk.
Every country that really had a very, very strong response in Asia had centralized healthcare. And a lot of the countries that had centralized healthcare in Europe but had a bad response kept their borders open for far too long and didn't respond well in terms of the lockdown, and didn't respond quick enough with that. Like Britain was one of the last. Although Britain has a very good and centralized healthcare system, they were one of the last countries to lock themselves down. So I don't think you can really sit here and say that's the healthcare system's fault.
What I'm saying is, process. I don't think that, some people are saying that the centralized healthcare systems that the U.S. doesn't have is why the U.S. handled things so poorly. Because when you look at East Asia, for example, like Taiwan or South Korea, they had faced SARS pretty recently, and they had really built up their medical systems to enable themselves to fight not necessarily coronavirus, but a similar infectious disease. And that's really a big part of why they were so prepared. I mean, there's definitely blame to go around in America. A lot of doctors and people in the medical field, scientists and what have you, they've called out Trump he kind of tried to toss it off and maintain optimism, and he didn't act quick enough. And I think there's certainly some blame to be had there. But
you also have to look at what New York did in response, because mainly a lot of deaths are coming out of New York.
Mm-hmm.
For example, what Andrew Cuomo did when it happened was, when a lot of elderly people started getting sick, instead of taking them into the hospital and putting them in an isolated spot, he said, no, go back to the nursing homes. And who's at most risk for dying at COVID-19? It's the elderly people above 65. And when you put them back into a nursing home, you're spreading the infection at the most vulnerable population. And, compared to Florida didn't have as many deaths, but their lockdown was completely different. In my opinion, I would allow the businesses to stay open, and I would mainly focus on the vulnerable populations, people with prior conditions, asthma, or the elderly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nathan. I think around 40 to 50% of deaths globally come from the elderly and nursing homes. So I think that is a big problem that needs to be solved within in terms of governmental response. I think Cuomo horribly failed in that part because there are so many deaths in New York of the elderly. That should be the primary focus.
Well, just so we're clear about how many deaths there were in New York is the most centralized. I mean, the amount of people per square mile in New York is
it's very dense.
Ridiculous.
Cool.
Yes, it's the most dense possible and most interactive city in maybe outside of China, maybe in the world. So to sit here and say, oh well, New York had so many deaths because they didn't handle the elderly well, it's kind of ignorant to geography itself. That's not a good take.
It's not because it's not
a criticism of their deaths and their cases. It's actually the policy that Andrew Cuomo enforced, that he basically said that the elder population had to go back to the nursing homes even if they had coronavirus. So the nursing homes were forced to take in patients from the hospitals. So that's what caused a lot of the deaths. I think it was a lot of policy. And I totally understand that New York City is a very dense place, but I'm not criticizing their numbers. I think it's different for every region, but I definitely think it's a result of the failed policy of Andrew Cuomo. But he also said recently in a press conference I saw that he was guided to that policy by something Trump released. So it might have been the fault of federal administrators.
Okay, you want to take this into the relief we've given to businesses, like big businesses specifically?
Yeah. We can. I think
I have an issue with that one.
I think the bulk of a lot of the federal stimulus has been, what do we do with jobs? Because we need people to have money to pay rent and what have you. Like, I think it was either the governor of, I think it's Garcetti, the mayor of Los Angeles. I believe he said you don't have to pay rent because a lot of people obviously didn't have money, but then people who did have money to pay rent weren't paying rent, and you're just basically ignoring the laws of our capitalist system, and then you're punishing those who hold land even if they needed the money just as much and they're relying on that for certain reasons. I mean, landholders are generally better off, but
Nico,
big problem,
just so we're clear, if we're going to play the numbers here and you're going to say, oh, poor landowners, that they're only barely scraping by.
Can you just ignore, you can't really ignore law because
you can't, no, I understand that. But at the same time, legality versus morality is a debate that we've had a lot. And the moral thing in this case would have been to tell people that they are absolved of having to pay rent, because in normal circumstances aren't persisting. And if someone who owns land isn't receiving rent, they're most likely going to be okay, versus if someone owns an apartment building and they don't get the rent from their apartment building for a month, 2 months, they're probably fine, because if they are in a position where they own an apartment building, they can probably make it through coronavirus.
Well, that's not always true, because look, our society rewards people for leveraging their positions. So a lot of people take loans to buy apartment buildings or buy a second or a house with 2 units.
Nico, that's anecdotal and hypothetical.
No, it's not anecdotal and hypothetical. That's very much so a fact of our society. A lot of people take in loans and then they allow another person to live there.
No, I agree, but it's a hypothetical standpoint versus you say people who are living in apartments probably don't have the amount of money that they need. And what's the alternative to this, right? You're kicking people, you're evicting people during the pandemic.
Most people are getting federal stimulus. In the U.S., it's $1,200 a month.
It's not enough.
Some people get to begin with.
That's not enough, Nico. $1,200 is not even close to enough.
And the problem I have with the federal thing is, you're comparing. If you look at the geographical regions of this country, if you got $1,200 in the South, or certain regions in the South, more rural areas, $1,200 is a lot. But within California, specifically Los Angeles, $1,200 is nothing. Even. Yeah, San Francisco.
San Francisco
1,200
has rent that's through the roof. It is ridiculous. So
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't account for the different regions of this country is one problem. The second problem I have is while our Congress failed as well. If you look at Congress, they gave money to big businesses when big businesses had alternatives to make money in order
Yeah.
to stay afloat. Small businesses they're failing to they failed at that part. Small businesses barely got anything when big businesses got bailed out.
do you want to
This country.
do you want to do the business and corporations thing later after we talk about the land owning, the whole stimulus and rent thing?
Well, one thing I was going to bring up is like comparing like in the US, what we've done with our, how we've provided for those people who've lost jobs is we've given unemployment checks. So people are getting furloughed and laid off. And then the alternative, which we've seen in like the European Union especially, is the government subsidizes wages. And as someone who's more economically conservative, when you have to provide like an economic stimulus, because you really kind of do when you enforce the lockdown, which caused a lot of these layoffs, at least in part. I think that's better because when people get laid off, then they're not expecting to go back to their job at that business. That business might be gone when the pandemic's over, or just like on its last legs. Whereas when you put people on unemployment checks, now they're just going to be looking for new jobs, and it allows the market to work to direct scarce resources that have various uses. And so that's why I lean on the side of what we've done in America. But then I suppose the counter argument is subsidizing wages. If we can get the economy back up quickly, then people are going right back to their jobs. I just think that's a bit more risky. And now you're getting the government involved in promising jobs that might not really exist. But I was curious to see what you guys thought in that sort of split.
Well, I think the problem stemmed from closing everything down in the first place, because all these small businesses are hurt because of closing down, and they can't.
Wait, are you advocating that we never close down ever?
Almost, yeah, maybe 2 weeks at most, but you'd have to enforce that, and I don't think with our system of government you can enforce staying at home. That's if you look at the.
But that's what we just did. That's what we've been doing.
Exactly. I think it violated a lot of civil rights. Now, if I agree with that, in which if you're looking at what we have as a government, they shouldn't be able to do that.
Okay, well, I get what you're saying, Nathan. You're saying, okay, well, the civil rights are being abandoned here, and then Nico, you were saying, well, our whole capitalist system, we're kind of enforcing inconsistent policies.
This is kind of something that no system.
I don't think that is really relevant when we're talking about a situation such as we're in like right now. I just don't think that I mean, I know it's the foundation for our country, and obviously we should abide by it in the future. And
but everyone else in the world also locked down.
Exactly.
No, I understand. That's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm talking in terms of our government and what they were supposed to do. I don't think they followed what we have planned for our country is necessarily true. I think we should have locked down. Is going, for example, corporation close. You could have like war measures in which you force them to start making masks or something that would be applied to that matter.
You kind of cut out for me. I really don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were cutting out, Nathan. But I think the government has a large responsibility in protecting public health. So I think the lockdowns originally were very necessary to slow the spread of the virus, because we do not want the hospitals to be overwhelmed. But of course, I think we all agree on this now, that we're in we're in late May right now, and it's definitely the time to start reopening and getting people back to work, because the shutdown is very unsustainable for the economy. But you have go ahead.
No, keep going. Okay, just so we're also clear, like the deaths of a ton of people that would have resulted from keeping the borders open would have been equally terrible for the economy, and by a lot of economists' measurements, worse. The deaths caused by keeping the borders open would have been worse for the economy in that.
Are you talking about borders? Or are you talking about borders?
I think it just means like keeping. Well, yeah.
In not locking down. Like if we had not locked down, the economy would have suffered more.
Lockdown
than when we did
borders?
lockdown for the first couple months.
Lockdown borders or like movement
Lockdown the
within, like,
entire country.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no,
Because
there's
like if you're talking about
a good deal of
borders,
truth
I would
there.
agree. I would agree completely with borders. Like you should close those down for a long time. But in
No.
terms
People
of
always want to close down borders, so.
Well, we should have closed down borders originally in March when we knew about this.
February.
much
But
sooner.
then we had
February, yeah.
one of the 2020 Democratic nominees or people that were running actually said that Trump was being racist when he suggested we should shut down
And xenophobic.
yeah, he said xenophobic. So
Don't forget that one, because
I mean,
God forbid, someone wants to protect their own country. God forbid. Like
What?
I think
the whole situation is being very politicized. I think the Democrats are definitely in the fault criticizing Trump. They're saying, well, he only cares about opening the economy because he wants everything to be flourishing and booming so he can get reelected. But that's just not true. I don't genuinely think that
he's
Trump
not going to get reelected if everyone dies.
he cares about
Yeah.
millions of Americans that are unemployed. So the Democrats are just over here like, oh, Trump criticizing the World Health Organization is a scapegoat and he just wants reelection. He's just politicizing the whole thing, and that's just not true at all.
To be fair,
I don't agree with Trump on those things, but he is
the
not-
scapegoat of the World Health Organization was a very real thing. Like they were telling people to lock down, and they were telling people to do things, and Democrats were saying to lock down, and he didn't do it for about 2 weeks. There was a 2-week time period in which they were saying to lock down, and Trump did not lock down. And then when everyone, he was like, oh, the World Health Organization never said that. And it's like, okay, but they did, and so did the rest of the Democrats say that for like 2 weeks. So I don't necessarily know what you're getting on.
I think there's a lot of
Well, I mean,
land to go around. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think anyone really handled this well or very well, but then again, there wasn't all that much information to begin with. Like, you can criticize China for not sharing much data or whether they had realistic data. Some people say they just
or where it
stopped
really
testing.
came, or where the virus really came
comes from China and the World Health Organization. I think 100% of the blame comes from China. I mean, the first case reported in November, and then they
Well, but do you blame like
for the whole entire World Health Organization, and they blocked Taiwan from reporting that there is human-to-human transmission, and they just blocked World Health Organization officials from actually studying the virus in China. They locked up people that were saying stuff about the virus.
Oh yeah, that one.
If China reported it
Doctor.
late 2019, like in December, January, I mean, this would not have been a huge issue. They let people travel freely from Wuhan. We should
also
considering the health and safety of having wet markets.
also something that China
Whoa. Wet market thing, off limits. Off limits on the wet market thing, because that's a cultural thing, and you can't mess with that.
Okay, it's culture, but it's
But you can
unsafe.
you can acknowledge
It's not
when
wrong for
culture
them.
is wrong.
I don't care if it's their culture, but if it kills people, then not right.
Nathan, you're cutting out.
No.
You're cutting out.
But Ben, no one has had wet markets for the purpose of killing people. Like that's
Right,
the
but
intention is not to
a
kill
lot of
people.
doctors are saying it's unsafe to eat bats.
Well, people don't use
You can't claim
fossil
it's
fuels with the
And
That's not racist.
it is
I'm not
ignorant
failing
to the
acknowledge
culture.
Their culture by saying that eating bats
doesn't
and
matter.
other wild animals is very harmful and can cause rabies and other.
Okay, then I have an idea. Why don't they just not eat anything, since all of them are like dirt poor?
You can't justify something on the basis of culture if it's killing people. Like,
Yeah,
But
because also
The intention is not to kill people.
doesn't matter what the
was never
intention
to-
is. It matters what the effect is.
Those people then
No, it doesn't.
I hate it.
Yes, it
yes,
does.
it does, and it
The
also
effect-
matters.
No, because
matters.
then you're down an entire rabbit hole of butterfly effects.
But you
But
can
you
also,
have to deal with effects, not intentions. Like, good intentions don't mean a
no,
thing if the
but I
effects
just
aren't
disagree.
good.
I don't care about protecting people's feelings and protecting their cultural identity.
Based.
Frankly, if it causes, public health issues.
Okay.
Well, and
so
specifically, and specifically, when you're talking about culture, and you can't say, oh, this part of their culture is wrong. We've done it multiple times. For example, FGM, female genital mutilation. We've acknowledged why that's wrong, and it's a part of certain cultures, and we've acknowledged it's wrong. So you're telling me that's a bad thing to acknowledge that's wrong?
No, because
I disagree. You can acknowledge
because the intention
wrong.
of that is immoral.
But the intentions don't matter when it results in a global pandemic.
You can argue that
then you're opening up a can of worms. If a kid kicks a soccer ball and it bounces off a pole and hits a trash can and hits in the middle of the street and causes a 4-car pileup and 6 people die, are you sending the kid to jail? No.
Yes.
It's a kid. And it's also an accident.
Well, and
But that's my point. That's my point.
No, but it's also a hypothetical.
That's also like a one-off thing. Wet markets were definitely helping spread and cause the virus and similar things. Like a kid kicking a soccer ball. Most times the kid's kicking the soccer ball, it's hitting the net, or it's not. Well, maybe not if he sucks, but
Most times
it's going not into the street to cause a 4-car pileup.
Yeah, soccer balls don't cause death, and they don't directly cause what you said, Hayden. Wet markets.
But it did directly cause.
But it didn't. That's a hypothetical.
It's indirect
If you look at it statistically, I guarantee there's more diseases coming out from wet markets than there are 4-car pileups coming from a soccer ball.
There are multiple
That's just
studies that state that these foods that are being eaten in the wet markets are extremely dangerous and can cause infectious diseases. And there have been a lot of diseases in the past that haven't, magnified on a big scale like coronavirus, thank God. But it's a huge issue. And if you claim that, preserving culture is more important than public safety, I mean,
there's not really an argument to be had there.
I'm just saying, if I told you 6 months ago that someone's going to eat a bat halfway around the world and it's going to cause hundreds of thousands of deaths, you would tell me that that's a hypothetical.
But
because it would have been a hypothetical by the definition of your
right.
argument.
So that's my point.
No, but also.
And so, what do you want to do? Wait, but what do you want to do about it? Like, what do you want?
If there's
you want to tell
consistent
China to shut down the markets because they won't?
Diseases,
they won't. But you can try to. But it's also Hayden. This has happened before with SARS. Like, we've known that this is a problem. So
no one's saying I wouldn't regulate. I just.
But my point, Hayden. My point is, the difference between the 4-car pileup from a soccer ball and this is if you told an educated, scientist that studied the, diseases that come out of animals and that sometimes occur in wet markets, he'd be like, wait a minute, you may be onto something, because we've known this is a problem before. When people eat stuff at wet markets that are exotic, they can sometimes carry diseases. He'd be like,
what do you want to do about it? So what do you want to do about it?
It's spread by wet markets. That's another example.
Shut down wet markets? Are you saying like there should be no FDA, like we shouldn't regulate food that is harmful to people?
Do you want the American government to regulate wet markets in China?
That's the problem. I understand, but I would think the accountability.
And God knows the UN doesn't have that power, and China's not going to do it. So I think it's a moot point.
Well, but you can hold them accountable.
There's enough international pressure.
Yeah.
If there's trade sanctions or whatever it is.
We need to rework business with the World Health Organization. They miserably, miserably failed. China's a piece of shit. They should not be trusted whatsoever in anything relating to public health, anything. They're communist.
Based.
Okay, China's not communist. Just so we get that out of the way, China's in no way communist.
They're somewhat communist, but they're also
no. I would
but
agree
their brand of communism directly benefits the elites.
No, but so it's
their economic
what they have is state capitalism. That's the economic system they have. I would acknowledge that, but it's a result of what communist policies lead to.
Not really.
It's human. Corruption is inhuman.
China is closer to fascism right now than they are to communism, and
Well,
I don't think that's
how did they get those powers?
What do you mean?
Because is what communism caused. It's what communism always does. Is there's corruption. Communism can't work because of human nature.
Well,
And that's
not
what
right
caused what
now.
happened.
It can't work because
I
of
don't
human
think we
nature.
should have this exact debate right now, though.
Yeah, we'll get into the economic aspects.
Yeah, I was going to talk about like the economic recovery, because like an optimistic data point, I got it from The Economist. It's by 2026, our unemployment levels will be the same as pre-corona. And that's optimistic. So very likely it's later, and that's not accounting for a possible second wave or something of that sort. So do we continue with our federal stimulus, or negative rates have been something that are talked about? I don't think we should do negative rates, because I think that can encourage malinvestment.
Explain what negative rates are to Ben and Nathan, because they probably don't know.
That's pretty funny.
Okay, so negative rates are when banks loan you money.
I know what it is.
And then you get the next money back.
No, when you put money into the bank, you are literally paid to put money into the bank. It's essentially what it is.
Yeah. But also with loans.
Yes, and I said loans and bank, yeah.
Okay, I didn't hear that. So the benefit is then people are more likely to take a risk, because if they have to pay it back, they lose less money. But the reason why I don't think we should do that is because it can either cause people to poorly invest and then they just default on those loans. That's something we saw with like the financial crisis, which is really bad. And the other thing is malinvestment. Or excuse me, that's what I just said. The other thing is banks might start to choke off money,
right.
And then there's just not any loans going out.
And like low-key inflation could become, like, you could see a above average level of inflation due to that, because you're pumping money in. That would,
well, you're going to see inflation almost regardless of what happens. There's always inflation in a crisis of this sort.
I guess, I mean, with the stimulus package anyway, the level of inflation will be constant. So you might as well, yeah, I see what you're going with there.
So, I mean, as a libertarian, if you want to encourage economic growth, then you cut regulations and things of that sort. But I was curious, like, do you guys Hayden, you're probably maybe the only one who has like a fleshed out idea for what to do, but if any of you have an idea on how
I supported Yang and the freedom dividend before even this all happened.
But then I think we can
improve stimulus packaging. I think we need to improve stimulus packages and create a separate stimulus package for essential workers. But
why would you give essential workers a stimulus package if they're the only people who still have jobs?
Because they put on, number one, you don't know that they necessarily still have jobs, but number two, they
much more so than like.
True. Okay. True. But they put together they risked their lives on a more.
We don't have money to give them.
What do you mean?
There's not enough money to give anyone. Like, we don't have enough money to do this.
But I thought corporations, when corporations were bailed out, there should have been a caveat in that saying that they had to pay their essential workers more.
I don't think the money needs to go to the people who still have jobs paying the same amount. I think the money needs to go to the people who are going to lose jobs, because that's what's the economy. And also, like, the value of essential workers is higher, sure, but like,
you have other ways for big corporations.
I think that they should be encouraged for the job that they've done.
But it's not like we necessarily need a tremendously higher amount of essential workers. If we need that, the market will hire more people, because it's essential workers and the government's not preventing them from working. I think we only need to provide money to people who don't have jobs, because you can't just let them starve because they're.
So how do you propose that?
I just don't think it's feasible whatsoever to provide more money for essential workers.
Okay, but Nico, how do you support, or how do you envision providing money to the unemployed? Unemployment fund or trickle down?
Well, trickle down doesn't provide the unemployed money. Trickle down raises wages. And it spurs new jobs. I think ideally we cut a lot of regulations and we cut taxes, because that's what's going to allow the economy to really grow at the highest rate.
No, because we will never be able to actually afford the stimulus packages if we're going to keep that as a normal thing. We would never be able to afford them on a regular basis.
Well, no, then you cut costs in other places. Like, there's a lot of areas in government where we don't need to spend. We're not going to be able to afford increased healthcare at a time like this. It's simply not going to happen. Like, there's no money.
I think that there's going to be certain industries that actually benefited from lockdown, right? Amazon being chief among them.
Sure.
Yeah, well, didn't he make like 48 billion now because of that? Like,
Yeah, no, he's making a shit ton of money. So I think what you have to do there is, I think that Congress as a whole has to go after Amazon and directly tax Amazon, and not on a taxation off the top type of basis. I mean, tax Amazon on sort of like what Yang was proposing during his presidential run, on a purchase by purchase basis, right?
But then you're punishing people who are, I mean, I guess you can, like, if people are, like, if they're scared to go to the grocery store because they're really old or they have a condition, and they say, now I'm going to order food from Amazon Fresh or whatever it's called, now you're basically punishing them for something they really, like, need to do. Or at least
not
a tax on the people, not a tax on the purchase.
Oh, okay.
You say, okay, an AI/computer was able to facilitate this purchase.
Are you taxing their revenues?
Let me explain. So in a normal grocery store pickup, what do you have? You have the people who are working the checkout, right? That's a job. That is a job with inherent labor, with a wage that needs to be paid due to that, and several different wages and several different jobs. Amazon gets to bypass that. They don't have to pay someone to do that. They have their website. It's ran by a computer, ran by AI.
Well, but so
Amazon cuts a cost on that. My point is that we should be taxing them it doesn't have to be equivalent to the job in which they are benefiting by not having to employ, right? But I'm saying we need to tax them per purchase of use of AI/computer. Almost in a way that makes up for the fact that they aren't having to provide labor and still making more money during this time.
Okay, I see. I understand. I thought you just meant taxing businesses that were
not a sales tax, not a sales tax.
Okay. No, I understand you now. I mean, I guess that flows more into like the debate of AI and what have you. But
yeah,
I just think generally cutting regulations and really modifying the laws in our country to help startup businesses is key, because startups they almost provide like nearly all of the new jobs. I mean, right now it'd be a bit different because people are going to start rehiring, but generally speaking, startup businesses are who hire the most, and that's who you need to flourish. And they get hit the most by regulations because they have to move through bureaucracy to simply start. And that's really where
wouldn't negative interest help that, facilitate that?
Well, yes, but there's other issues with that. Like if those businesses just default, then the people are back out of jobs. Or if negative rates go too far, don't work, then there's not many loans going out to start new businesses.
I mean, businesses will fail. Like that's the nature of businesses.
No, I know, but
right?
negative rates encourage people to take bigger risks. That's why they exist. But if people start taking too big of risks, then they're defaulting on their loans because their business failed.
I think that we can adjust it out on the fly. I would rather provide the opportunity and see if it doesn't work out and then adjust to that than be scared of something that we could potentially see like monitor down the road.
Well, we've seen negative rates be used before.
Yeah.
Japan's been using them for a while.
Well, who's been using them? You cut out.
Japan has been using negative rates for quite a while. I mean, not very negative, but I have something if I can find it.
I mean, I guess Japan is a very successful economic country in that way.
Their economic growth has plateaued since the 1980s.
True.
They're literally in decades-long recession.
Okay, but relative to the rest of the world,
they instituted negative rates.
And the fact that they plateaued since 1980 is largely a result of the fact that their meteoric rise due to technological innovation and the production of technological innovation was so quick, right?
No, but they haven't seen much, like they're not growing new or more domestic jobs. the reason they instituted negative rates was because of the recession, and they're still in it.
But they were losing jobs, and now they're plateauing. Or am I getting that
No,
wrong?
no. They just plateaued, and then because if you're not growing, you're really decreasing in size because of inflation.
Yes, I agree. Okay.
I just think it's not really that amiable of a policy. I think we've kind of exhausted it. The last thing, which might excite Mr. Nathan, is, if he's still here, is isolationism. Because, okay, so the main thing is like, before coronavirus really got out to the rest of the world, when it was just in China, they started locking down their country and preventing PPE from flowing out into other countries like America, and they started stockpiling. And now in America or in Western Europe, there's major shortages of it. So that's where the argument of like keeping those products in our own country exists.
Yes, that's actually a problem because
Well, I was going to say the flip side of that is then you can sort of get into a spiral where now every country's locking down and you don't allow, like if you have global free trade, then the PPE is going where it's most needed because that's where they'll pay the most, right? And so now it's more of a debate of, do you want to only protect your national citizens, which I think Nathan will take, or do you want to allow it to go where it's most desperately needed? Or like in the third world would get killed if we started this spiral down.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
But I think can I say something real quick?
Yeah, good.
I think the problem is if we didn't rely too much on China specifically for all these goods, because I think it was like 87% of the medical drugs we need comes from China. 87%. So what's stopping if we were to ever have a problem with China, like a real problem, where they say, you know what, let's stop providing the medical supplies they need in
well, then we
United
could stop
States.
buying from China, and then their whole economy would die.
Nathan, what's stopping corporations from leaving America if we committed to isolationism, right? And we say, okay, now corporations make as many jobs as you can, and the economy is stagnant because we're isolationists, then what is stopping corporations from moving?
Well, I think the isolationism here is more so in relation to just like corona-related products like testing kits or PPEs, so like ventilators.
For right now, yes. For right now specifically, yeah.
Isolationism is not feasible.
But you could start getting more, national or getting more products within our own country, because this just highlighted specifically for medical supplies is the fact that we rely too much on China. Now, for other things, we probably rely on China as much for. So I think, depending on the crisis, it illuminates different parts of the economy that we rely too much on a foreign power, especially one that is not our friend.
But for every dollar that we rely on China for, like the rest of the world relies on us for a lot more.
Well,
right?
China's economy is very reliant on America in the sense that
they
need to export to us. That's their goods go to America, go to Western Europe to be sold. They have a growing middle class, but they still sell the most of their products to.
But that's with commercial goods. But in the point of, like you just said earlier, how when this happened, China started keeping everything within their own country to allocate supplies to themselves. For medical supplies, that's a real problem.
Yeah, but should we punish them for it by perhaps like coming together as a global community and saying they're not allowing goods to flow where they're most needed? Or should we take
what I'm saying?
Just only protecting ourselves and not worrying about what everyone else is doing? Because I think free trade would reduce the global death toll the most in regards to how we're spreading around protective equipment.
Agreed.
But it's also, I would say, I'm not saying we punish China necessarily for them keep supplies within their own country. I'm saying we should start mass producing within our own country, bring back manufacturing to this country.
Well, we have been doing that. Businesses have already
easy to say, hard to do.
No, well, a lot of businesses have already like car manufacturers have started producing ventilators. Like at the beginning of this, so many companies did that.
That's also because of No, that's because of war measures proposed by Donald Trump. That's what happens when a government uh, creates like a
Yeah, but
what's it
if a
called? Like a
business is
But
capable of producing something that there's going to be demand for, they will do it because they
That's
know
not.
it's money.
That's well, yes, but it's not what that's not what happened in this country. What happened in this country is Trump was like, we need to allocate you this business. We're going to pay you this much, and you need to do this. It's not what you're saying of the free trade. It's not what saying of the free market doing it. Yes, it may happen in some other occurrences, but that's not what happened in this
But
scenario.
But
actually, I don't think Trump compelled businesses to.
I don't remember hearing anything about
I
that.
don't think he did that. I think he did not do that because he wanted to appeal to his base and not seem like a communist. So I don't think he did that. And if we are,
Yes, yes, he did. Yeah.
I don't
no,
think
I suppose we gotta
I
look
can look
it
it
up.
up. I'll look it up.
Yeah.
national citizens, Nathan. I think we should be compelling the private sector to produce tests and ventilators and all of those essential items.
Yeah, I think that sort of
I don't
ties
think
back
there's
into
much-
like,
Yeah, I don't think there's much need for regulating the global economy and us slowing down other nations.
I never said to regulate the global economy.
well, but aren't you arguing in favor of maintaining
Almost, not necessarily all.
maintaining like PPE and stuff?
Not necessarily.
Wouldn't you be in favor? I thought you were saying you were in favor of something like that, and that's something that has been encouraged.
I'd be in favor of I would be in favor of starting producing more goods in this country, specifically medical supplies, especially when we need it the most.
But we've already been doing that.
And also I would like to bring up but it's not at a certain point. It hasn't happened because, like I said, 87% of medical
Are you
drugs
saying
that
we
we
should bring
need is
back
still
major
produced in China.
manufacturing into the country, like for all things?
Yes. Well, at first, I would think we need to do it in gradual steps. First, we'd have to do it with, necessary essential items like, medical supplies and stuff like that. That would be the first step, especially since it's of this global pandemic. But I think you would start gradually doing it for other sectors of the economy.
Well, guys, I think this debate kind of goes into a larger discussion. Maybe have another time about whether to, isolationism in general, in terms of
global food chain.
the economy, and then also global politics. We can get into the UN. I mean, concerned to coronavirus specifically, Trump is obviously pulling us away from the United Nations and the World Health Organization. He's obviously cutting our funds down. I think we contribute 20% of the total funds of the World Health Organization. So we can get into that more later and not specifically talk about coronavirus, but just how we want to handle ourselves, because Trump is definitely an isolationist in all aspects. So
Yeah. Did you find something, Hayden?
He invoked the National Defense Production Act, which he can basically force people to. It's a really long law. I'm reading through.
How many instances?
What I've seen so far is he has the ability to force corporations to create something, but no corporation so far has said no. I'm not sure though if that comes with an economic incentive for them.
Well,
Yeah.
I think with the act that you were saying, I think the government gives them a set price, but I'm not for sure. I think it gives them a set price.
Yes.
We'll pay this much for it, and this is what you have to do.
Yeah, but
So
I mean, it's
contracts.
compulsory.
What? Here you go.
So like he just basically gave different businesses contracts to produce them.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, I see.
Like, for example, I think there was something with like certain car industries. Maybe it was Tesla.
General Motors,
I think,
or General Electric.
or I think it was General Motors, maybe. But I think they had certain supplies for either it was like test kits that they made their cars or something with. That it was something along those lines that they had. They could allocate certain resources that they would normally make whatever they made.
Your point is to do this over long term. You want to continue this past lockdown and nationally support corporations long term with these contracts in order to
With contracts,
your way around the economic deficit that would come with isolationism.
Possibly. It just depends on what the crisis is at the time.
But so if you're paying General Motors to create ventilators, then who's making cars, right? I mean, I don't know if we necessarily have infrastructure we don't have the infrastructure in isolationism because we've traded it all away.
That's a problem. But my point, I'm not saying we keep them forcing
as a country.
I'm not saying can I finish? I'm not saying we necessarily make them do it for a certain period of time, for a long time. I'm saying when a crisis comes up, or for a certain period of time when we need it, we need to get a certain amount, whether an economist or a doctor says this is how much ventilators we need, in case of a pandemic. I'd have that allocated after you force them to make it. Once they get the set number you need, then they can go back to what they need to be making, or they could split the sector half and half. So, whatever it may be, 75% going to the cars they make and 25% going to ventilators.
But the issue isn't making medical supplies. The issue is making like the rest of the infrastructure that we would be missing out on if we were to isolate from China. If we were to cut off trade from China, we're losing very, very, very large number of goods that we would have to create by our own.
But also, then we're having American workers work in manufacturing instead of like more service-based jobs that pay more.
Exactly. So we're turning the clock back
with AI. With AI, and that would be help combat the workers you'd need, and it would allow us to both produce our own goods and make sure that people have jobs, and it would combat all two of those things.
Either you provide jobs or you have AI do the labor, but you don't get both.
No, but the problem what I'm saying is, for example, if people are not willingly going back into these manufacturing jobs, if they, for example, the people that are unemployed, when we get back to a normal level, those people that don't have jobs, that aren't working in the service industry or other industries, they would go to those places. But at one point when there's no more people needed for these jobs, you would eventually start switching it over to AI and automation.
Nathan, one thing about the Trumps, I forget the name of the act that Hayden mentioned, where he ordered businesses to start producing like the PPE and what have you, is they haven't, like, the federal system on how to distribute them has not been very effective. So, like, I think
you'd have to.
In the post I'm reading, Florida got like everything it requested, but Massachusetts did not get nearly enough of what it needed.
And a lot of that had to do with Trump trying to, he was choosing red states to allocate these things over.
That's why you don't trust the government, because the government always has biases, and the free market would go where it's most needed, which means where they're paying the most. Ooh. That's why you really like.
But then you're also disenfranchising the people that need it, when your people who pay the most aren't necessarily the people who need it the most.
If there's less of a good in a capitalist system, people will pay more. That's just a general trend. That's literally like.
But eventually, when you don't realize that certain amount people can't pay, there's certain levels when they can pay, and then they can't go much more. They don't have much more to offer. That's what you don't realize, and then it goes.
No, but businesses recognize where there's the most need, and they say, we're most like, if there's a market that needs it the most, they're going to sell it quicker, and they're possibly going to sell it for more. Granted, with PP and stuff like that, price controls are pretty common, and they have their pros and cons. But like, since it's a government done thing, the prices never rise. But then you get like ventilators or masks that just aren't going anywhere because you're putting faith in the government to spread it, or you're getting the biases like we saw where it went to a red state over blue. Now, I'm not sure if that's exactly why it happened. It could just be a government inefficiency, but there was something wrong with that. And
that's a whole nother system in which you need to reform the federal system. That's a whole nother issue.
Decentralized economics doesn't work.
I'm not saying to centralize all economics. I'm saying this is specifically for times of crisis. You can't always rely on the free market to do what's best. You say, who pays
But
the
generally
most?
speaking, the free market.
Well, that's who will go to.
It's almost always more.
It doesn't help, but it doesn't help the most people. It doesn't help the people that need it the most of the time. It helps the people that can pay the most. There's a difference.
I'm going to side on this one. I think the government does have a duty to intervene in the economy in times of need. I mean, with coronavirus.
I'm saying when we intervened, it didn't work that well. And that's just what happened.
But a lot of that had to do with the deficit of the federal system. And honestly, if you look at a lot of what happened between like the confederacy of the states, like regardless of the federal system, like you saw stuff where like California before their wave hit, but when New Jersey's wave was hitting, sent something like 500 ventilators to New Jersey, right? And then New Jersey returned them when Los Angeles was having its problem. And so in a lot of ways, we were relying on a confederate system that was valuing states' powers, which is, I mean, obviously it's more voluntary, which you run into problems later. But the fact that we had to rely on that because Trump was so biased in his allocation of these things, which is well documented, that's not even a debate. Trump intentionally sent supplies to
Trump
red states.
Trump wasn't in direct control. There's not like evidence of Trump saying this has to go to red state. That's just what happened.
But if you look at who was sending, if you look at who received the federal supplies, and then you back that up against who was having the biggest problems, you see blue states with Chicago, Detroit, New York, Massachusetts. You see all of the blue states who are having the biggest problems, not getting as many.
Blue states are generally higher density populations too.
Right, which is my point. Which is why they should have received more of these.
I
call them medical infrastructure.
Like you said earlier, they're bound to have bigger problems.
Yes, exactly, and yet they didn't receive their fair share of the supplies, which is worrisome for me that we have to rely on a confederate system. Although, I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to a confederate system.
States, oh, never mind. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, personally, this isn't even the debate. Personally, I'm in favor of a four-part system, like a confederacy between Pacific states, Atlantic states, northern states, and southern states. But that's an entirely different debate.
Yeah, the last time that happened.
Impasse on the, compelling the private sector and all that, and interventionism. Nico, were there any other topics? Any other subtopics?
I think that was the last one.
But you can also look at the problems with globalism that caused certain issues like this.
I mean, the one other thing I was going to say was like another argument for deregulating an atomic crisis like this is there's a lot of federal regulations that supposedly uphold quality, or like actually not federal, state regulations. Like, for example, doctors at the beginning of this, they weren't allowed to move around between different states. But like if there's a need for doctors in like California and not in Nevada, like that's just a general argument for deregulation that in this case was hurting us or would have hurt us in regards to coronavirus. But it's not so much something that's like, it's not really a debate because it's really only gone towards deregulation. I'm just saying like there's yet an example of why we should deregulate.
I'm with you on deregulating social aspects like that. I don't know if deregulating economic aspects, which of course is a result of our political compass.
That's a whole nother debate too.
Right. I mean, that's basically our political compass debate. You and I will agree inevitably on that social axis, but we differ of where the economy comes in. Nathan, you were talking about globalism and how this whole virus is a result of globalism.
Well, not completely, but it's also it shows some of the flaws of globalism.
But I just see that as such a stupid, and I mean, no offense, I see that as such a stupid argument because the quality of life increase that has been a result of globalism is very much well documented. So you can sit here and say, oh, well, globalism caused, like terrorism, globalism caused coronavirus. But when you look at the average quality of life over the past decade and how globalism has increased that inherently, I don't see your argument having any basis.
Well, but for the quality of life, that applies to other countries besides the United States, who is already on a rapid incline of due to what we have. If you're looking at quality of life, it improved in countries that aren't the U.S. It improved in developing countries because they got better access to things that are provided by the developed world. And
Why is that a bad
I'm
thing?
for favoring, because I'm for favoring Americans. That's the goal of the American government.
Wait, but so favoring Americans doesn't mean you have to have developed nations suffer.
It's one of the results of globalism, which hurts the American, because, like you said,
But
because
ethically, I'm
it
not
improves
okay with
the
that.
But that's your value system. But in terms of what our government is supposed to do is to help our people. That's the whole debate. Is our government supposed to help humanity? But
Yes.
that's difference of values. But now we're getting new difference of values.
Well, I just
the
don't
whole
find
point
it
of a government because then you're thinking of a world government. My point is, what a nation's government is supposed to do is care for its nation's people, not humanity. Humanity is not supposed to. It's not supposed to further the goals of humanity. It's supposed to further the goals of people.
I see your point, but I don't find it ethical when you're saying I would like to improve the life of 100,000 Americans, but at the same time, by improving the lives of 100,000 Americans, I'm actively making sure that the lives of 10 million people around the world aren't as good. Like, I don't find that an ethical stance to hold.
But that's not okay. I see where you're coming from. You're saying, oh, it's decreasing the quality of life or whatever for the developing world. But that's just what globalism does. Is it either harms one or the other. Now, you may say that, oh, if we keep globalism, it's a net positive for the humanity because, maybe American life doesn't improve this, it doesn't improve a lot, but in terms of all of humanity, it does improve, a certain amount. I'm more concerned about the lives of the people in America. We still got people homeless. Flint, Michigan is another problem. Why aren't we caring for the people within our own country before we care about people in the developing world?
But that's such a weird black and white way of framing that argument. I don't think anyone's going to attest here that a factory job is far worse than a service job, right? So, and the fact is that globalism has enabled us to have much more service jobs, which also pay more, just through the chain of economics.
Yeah, globalism has increased wealth everywhere.
But you realize Hayden, the problem with that is if you're talking about ethics by globalism and having service-based industry in this country and allocating the tough jobs to China and other countries that are developing, you're hurting the people there because they're not following minimum wage. They're not following the safety standards that are developed in the civilized world. In China, they pay them what, like $1 a day?
But
they don't have
before they didn't even have jobs. They were like being like they had a feudal society. So
no.
So
if you try and cut down,
that's the response. But I'm not saying we should cut down sweatshops. I'm saying we should put it back into our country. It's not our responsibility to get rid of the feudal system in China. It's not our responsibility to provide jobs.
Pay more for products.
But it's employing American workers.
But then that's decreasing the real wages of people, which is going to cause us to have to either increase.
No, it's decreasing the profits of big corporations. And Nico, it's not cool to shill for big business.
I think you can simplify. I think you're just oversimplifying the whole isolationist stance and kind of thing. I mean, if we just totally shut ourselves off from the world completely,
but it's a great Ben. But you're
UN completely separated ourselves from all the humanitarian aid that we've been giving, for a while now. I think there are a ton of implications of doing that. I mean, we would be totally cut off from global trade. I mean, that's just, it's so simplistic. And I mean, I respect your viewpoint, obviously, but it's definitely a different argument. I think we've devolved.
You're failing. You're Ben.
So I think we can talk about this another time.
Ben,
in terms of isolation.
No, but Ben, you're taking this out of context. You're thinking like, what, from today to tomorrow, we're just going to cut off everything. We're going to be like foreign aid, no more tomorrow. UN, we're out of it tomorrow. That's not what's happening. It's a gradual step. You have to take it one by one, and it's a process that could take 5, 10, 20 years. You're acting like it happens in one day, and if it happened in one day, it would cause a big problem.
I'm not saying that in one day. I'm just saying you're making general statements about isolationism and putting the interests of American citizens first. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
Nico,
don't even
Ben,
think that's
and I have all
necessarily
mentioned.
the
about,
case.
oh, should we gradually move towards isolationism? I mean, you're going to have to get specific with me here. When you're saying isolationism, are you talking about the political aspect, or are you talking about distancing ourselves from different UN organizations and treaties like we have done with the Paris Climate Accord and
That's a different.
Are you talking about the economic aspect? I mean, you're going to have to be specific with me.
Right now, right now, what we're talking specifically about economics, and it's shown that when we rely too much on a foreign power that doesn't necessarily like us, it doesn't benefit Americans. Now, when you're talking about the political aspect in the UN, I would agree we should.
How has it been shown?
Because we rely, because
our economy.
Yeah, they're
has,
cutting off what we need.
How?
I think we're kind of getting out of hand here. We're getting into a whole other debate.
But I just want to. I don't understand his argument whatsoever. Our economy
as a result,
is flourishing under globalism. Nathan, here's what you're not understanding, right?
Hayden, you're not understanding that we're talking in the fact of the pandemic. Right now, we're talking the fact of the pandemic, and the fact is China cut off PPE because they need it for their own country. And if we had our own system built up and we had our own infrastructure built up, this would never have been a problem.
That's such a weird, narrow-minded way of like.
But that's just hindsight. You can't think like that.
The PPE thing sucks, but like at the same time, you weigh that against not centuries, but like generations and decades worth of like economic growth as a result of globalism. But and now you're saying, we should dial it all back because we didn't get PPE from China during like the pandemic.
That's not the only reason. But right now, I'm specifically talking about the economy.
Here's where I think you have to understand. Here's where I think you have to really. Here's the end wrap up generalization that you have to distinguish from. Globalization will inherently increase the value, increase technological capabilities, and advance the economy of the world. And it will improve lives around the world.
Very much so.
But the key word,
culture.
Okay.
It will blend society. It will blend culture.
But blending culture.
Stop.
But blending culture is a problem because you basically no. You can't let them say that and then no.
This is good. This is good.
Ben, let us just keep going.
Blending culture. Are you kidding me?
We're not going in circles. This is an important debate. This is a new.
You just said you. Okay, first of all,
go ahead.
First of all, you just said the keywords there where you were just saying it improves the life of the global citizens. I do not care about global citizens. I care about the American people.
Yeah, Nathan, but globalism is
you a question.
Very much so.
If you had the choice of killing 5 million citizens that did not reside in America over killing 1 million citizens in America, what would you choose?
Like it's an easy choice for all of us.
It's the 5 million people in a foreign country. If I'm in the position of the American, if I'm in the position of the American government, I'm killing the 5 million people, and God knows where they are. Not the 1 million people I'm elected to serve. Why are you kidding me? What? You just destroyed yourself with that own hypothetical.
But I just don't.
Nathan's just like cult-like worship for the American people.
Yeah, no, I don't get what you're. You're going on about. Because Nathan, here's what you're not representing, right? In your mind, globalism destroys traditions. It destroys the traditional destroys the traditional basis of society. And in your eyes, that is a decrease in the quality of life societally, regardless of economics. My argument is, if you're increasing the quality of life of people through economics, culture is a never-ending, changing, totally in flux since the beginning of human history. Culture is not set. The American culture is technically founded on the fact that it's a melting pot of cultures from around the world. The American culture is not a
he's arguing
definable.
that it takes manufacturing jobs, it takes jobs that should be in America, which hurts us.
Right.
But it also gives us new jobs that pay more. That's why America has the biggest GDP in the world. It's not because we have the most workers, because we have higher paying jobs, and that's benefited us more than it's benefited China, I think. Like,
Yes. Globalism will
you're
make the economy
how
better.
important high wages are.
Globalism will improve the economy. The
Yeah.
question is, do you see that improvement worth it comparatively to the evolution of culture and effectively the loss because of the combination of culture?
I mean, the culture argument's something else, but like if we're talking good for the American people versus net good, I think that it's very beneficial to both, and it was better for America to globalize than it was.
But hey, Nico, you're taking the position of the GDP, which is what's a result of big corporations, making.
That's much higher in America too.
Yeah.
American people have.
But that's as a result of being. That's a result of us being. That's a result of us being a global superpower. Whether it comes to the economy,
a global superpower because of free trade. That's why we have international corporations.
I understand that, but what's happening now is hurting America. It's hurting specifically American workers at the lower level, not big business. Big business benefits from globalism.
Why?
Big
No,
business
but
benefits
if
from
you're going to
immigration.
improve the lives of Americans at the lower level, then if you're improving the lives of Americans at the lower level, then you're making lives worse for Americans at the mid-level. That's the way that an economy works. The middle class.
That's not necessarily.
No, it is, but it is. That's the way that an economy works. You'd be decreasing the wage. You'd be decreasing the wage of the middle class.
Yeah.
That's not because the service industry would still be there, and it would be.
But there's less
lower levels of the industry of mass industry would be.
Nathan.
Someone's gotta pay.
No, but Hayden, what you don't. Yes, other countries when they're trying to import when they're putting.
No, but if you bring manufacturing jobs into America,
wait a minute.
It's going to cost more money. It will. That's a fact. And that
wait a minute. No, I'm responding.
Workers.
Can I respond to Hayden real quick because you're going past. I was going to say back to Hayden.
Yes.
Talking about when you bring these industries back, and you said, when you bring these industries back. And when you employ the lower level people, you're saying it would decrease the values of the middle class, but that will not be true when you're able to provide a more effective supplies when you're replacing these workers with automation, when you don't need these workers anymore because they're employed in the service industry. It's a gradual change that you have to acknowledge.
Here's how an economy works. Before the transition happens from American labor to AI, that labor will be outsourced. That's the way that before AI happens, outsourcing will happen. It's the simple evolution of economics.
But Hayden, you need it back here to employ the people that are out of jobs, not as a result of COVID-19, but just because they're out of jobs, because they're not working in certain industries, and you need to replace it with mass industry. And with mass industry, once these people are able to transition,
that's not what's going to happen, Nathan.
No, when their kids
that's
get better.
not how an economy.
Yes,
Nathan, what's going to happen is
your argument is more jobs. Your argument is we must create more jobs. But what Nico and Saya are saying is that that's great, but then you look at the way that quality of life is influenced by that. The unemployment rate really is kind of like
you're just sort of neglecting like how much globalism has benefited America. Like the whole the American dream, which is like one of the most
the American dream. Oh, well, tell me about the American dream, Nico.
It's not a manufacturing job. It's
let me hear about
getting into the middle class. That's the American dream.
Nathan, really? mindlessly giving people factory jobs so that you can get populist support because you're decreasing unemployment is not an ethical and not an effective economic policy.
But it's not just to get their support. It's not to get their support. It's to employ people.
Yeah, but Nathan, the economy will adapt and find new jobs.
But the point is,
it's always happened.
That takes.
You're getting out, Nathan.
Might be the only way we can get out of this debate alive.
Nathan, whenever you cut out, it sounds like a Travis
Say-
Scott ad-lib. Like it just auto-tunes your voice, and it's hilarious.
To advance, business. These older black people know relevant, and they'll place AI. I don't think you need a step of outsourcing. You cut out the middleman.
But then you're decreasing jobs.
Nathan, you can't just bring back jobs into America that were outsourced and expect the prices to stay the same. Prices will go up.
Prices will go up. But Nico, I don't think you understand that it's not that it's going to hurt everybody when the prices go up. For example, it's not so much of a price increase it's not a huge price increase that will be detrimental to it's not detrimental to everybody when a price increases on certain goods. For example, shirts, if it goes up $5, well, maybe you buy 2 shirts instead of 3. It's benefiting American workers net positively instead of.
But that happens on many fronts, and then you reduce quality of life. That's just
because you don't own 3 shirts. I think.
But that's just.
But
one
you're
example.
ignoring other.
More.
But you're ignoring other people's quality of life and benefit for the upper class and the upper middle class.
What I'm saying is the market will fix itself if you give it time. It's just a matter of propping up people who don't.
But you're ignoring the people in this time. Then
no, I'm not.
No, you're not.
I'm literally not.
Yes, it is.
We provide for them as a government in this society, but I'm saying that you're
against that. You're against government providing for the people.
Yeah, but I'm saying you're going about it in the wrong manner.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. I'm not disagreeing.
We don't fundamentally disagree. I think we just disagree on how to get there.
I think we disagree on how an economy works. I think Nico and I are operating up here.
Oh,
Nathan is operating down here with more job equal good economy. I don't really see how.
No, that's not necessarily. Okay, no, you guys are just ignoring you're thinking specifically Nico. Nico's like, oh, big business make good profit. No. You're thinking big business makes big profit. That's good for America, right? No.
But I agree with you there, but I don't think that how you're going about it is the correct way to go about it. I think that taxing off the top is the correct way to redistribute. But bringing back factory jobs is devolving back to the 1950s.
I think we need to progress and adapt.
1950s were the best time of America.
No, it wasn't. Our quality of life is much higher right now.
Also, you're just disregarding all minorities.
Yes, exactly.
You're taking the.
I'm talking about the economy. I'm not talking. You're saying, oh, I'm against minorities, but Hayden, I'm talking more about the economy, not necessarily about the systems we had in place. I'm not saying bring back Jim Crow. That's just.
You think the economy was good for minorities in the 1950s?
Yeah, but Nathan, our economy progressed so much, and you can't just go back and say that, oh, we'll just get rid of automation somehow. I mean, you can't you're taking the economic stance of somebody in the Rust Belt where you're just saying, oh, well, they just want to keep their jobs that, they have generated.
But those people can't adapt now. It's too late for those people. They can't adapt.
Exactly. So why are you trying to bring back those jobs?
Because those are the jobs they had. If you're just letting what you want to provide welfare services to these people that lose their jobs as a result of globalization, that's where you and Nico disagree, and that's going to cause a great problem.
Globalization brings new jobs into America that pay higher.
Nico, you're not listening. Because Nico, you're not listening. No, Nico, you're not listening because I'm talking about the Rust Belt, and which Hayden just brought up or Ben just brought up about those people. And like I said, those people can't adopt to the new jobs that are coming in as a result of globalization. Now, when you go back to that point, and when that happens, and when we have people like you in government, when we have people like Hayden in government, there's going to be a stalled process because you're going to say, no, let's not give them welfare because I'm against, people leeching off the government. And then Hayden's going to be like,
welfare.
But that's your whole economic, then you're going against the whole system you support.
You need to provide money to people who can't get jobs. Most libertarians
as a result of globalization, that's you caused.
But you're just neglecting the fact that globalization brought in many new jobs. Consider this. people are going to have more leisure time when they're not tired out from working all day at whatever, like factory they were working at. And
but if we're talking about the specific people we're talking about, those people don't have jobs in the first place.
But it makes new jobs. You're looking at.
But you're
site of losing jobs, and you're neglecting.
You're neglecting the people that we're talking about specifically right now.
They found new jobs.
Wait, so Nathan,
they don't find new jobs. Is the problem? That's not what's happening.
So Nathan, your whole stance is you want to nuke the middle class so that we can give like the 4% of America who's unemployed jobs.
When did I say to nuke the middle class? When did I say to nuke the middle class?
That's what would happen.
That's what's gonna happen.
That's not what happens. You guys are simplifying what would happen, and you're saying, oh, because prices go up for certain goods, all of a sudden the middle class is gonna disappear. That's just frankly not true.
No, yes, it is.
It is that coupled with the fact that service jobs won't be able to acquire such a high level of pay, and just I see
why
what you
not?
want.
Why wouldn't they?
Because that's how an economy works, Nathan.
It's like you just don't. I don't know how else to.
I don't think you understand. Okay. Oh my. You just don't understand.
Guys, I think we're not going to get any farther in today's episode. We should maybe do another one of these, but like, I don't think we're going to get anywhere new. We
could do one on like an ideal society and then like ideal economy, and we can like.
Well, ideal economics is stupid.
Ben, end the recording now because we're talking about topics and other stuff.
All right.
See you guys.
We'll see you guys.
Wait. 3, 2, 1. Based.
Based.